Study section 10. John Donne and English Metaphysical Poetry. Introduction. In this study section, we will discuss English metaphysical tradition and the contribution of John Donne and other poets in the tradition. Essentially, you'll be prepared to understand the difference between this tradition and others in English poetry. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to differentiate between metaphysical poetry and other traditions in English poetry. Discuss the contributions of John Donne to metaphysical. An overview of metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry was popular between 17th and 18th centuries. Poets in this tradition wrote differently from Elizabethan poets. Elizabethan poets wrote under Petrarchan tradition, in which poetry was embellished, flowery, and rhetorical. Their poetry also showed platonic love for women. Women were made heroes, and their appearances in poetry were exaggerated. Metaphysical poets use what is called wit and conceit, that is piling of metaphor upon metaphor in such a descriptive manner, in an attempt to exhibit their descriptive ability, and image on image. So there is the use of extravagant metaphor, image, hyperbole, elaborations, and baroque or excessive ornamentation. Metaphysical poets included John Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, Henry Vaughan, and Richard Crashaw. As a metaphysical poet, Richard Crashaw represents a new trend of metaphysical poets. He is known for his use of verbal emblem and baroque, while Vaughan is known for his use of visual emblem. Hence, we will analyze the contribution of John Donne to metaphysical poetry in the next section. Contributions of John Donne to metaphysical poetry. John Donne was born in London by wealthy parents. He was brought up as a Roman Catholic. He enrolled in Art Hall, Oxford, and left without a degree in 1854 because he refused to take the oath of supremacy, which was a prerequisite for his qualification. He became a member of Parliament in 1601 and secretly married Anne, a 17-year-old girl, in the same year. The union was discovered and Donne was dismissed from Parliament and briefly imprisoned. He was jobless and life became tough. He has 7 surviving children and he suffered from different kinds of sicknesses. He was depressed and he traveled to Europe. His frustration was reflected in his holy sonnets. He became involved in religious thoughts. He wrote some religious books such as Beletanos, a prose work about Christianity and suicide, and Pseudomatia, another prose work meant to persuade English Roman Catholics to take the oath of supremacy. In 1615, he took holy orders and James I appointed a royal chaplain. His wife died in 1617 and Donne was visibly shaken by the experience. He returned to London in 1622 and was made the Dean of St. Paul's, London. He excelled in the position. Most of his poems were concerned with the theme of death, even in the Holy Sonnet, which he wrote before his ordination. Holy Sonnet 10. Death, be not proud. Death, be not proud. Though some have called thee a mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou sinkest, thou dost overthrow. Die not, poor death, nor yet can thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but the pictures be, much pleasure, then from thee much more must flow. and sonnet our best men with thee do go. Rest of their bones and soul delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or chance can make us sleep as well. And better than thy stroke, why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Death Be Not Proud is a very philosophical and religious poem. The poem was informed by the agony that accompanied the experience of his wife's death. He foregrounded the fact that death is a slave and weakling, that is neither dreadful nor mighty, but just a passage to eternity and place of rest. He even argues that death cannot kill him, and that death itself will die. Donne begins the poem by addressing death. The tone is angry and argumentative. The poem is dramatic and introduces a twist to the Petrarchan tradition of the sonnet, while its octave retains the tradition rhyme pattern of A-B-A-B, A-B-A-B in the sextets. The rhyme pattern changes to C-D-D/C-E-F. He argues that Elizabethan techniques were too artificial, ornamental, and rhetorical, so he wrote in a colloquial, casual manner instead of the poetical, rhetorical techniques of the Petrarchan poetic tradition. He wrote the way he felt about women. He was schooled in law, philosophy, logical, classic, religion, and cosmology. He brought all of this knowledge to poetry. He aimed at a select audience of few people who were as knowledgeable as him, so his poetry was difficult. The difficulties in some of his poems arose from his use of 1. Metaphysical concepts, obscure metaphor, dialectics. His poetry is argumentative and dramatic. 4. Sometimes his poetry takes the form of syllogism, as in his poem Death Be Not Proud. 5. In some of his poems, we have 3-part mathematical approach to poetry. In the first part, we have a question. In the second part, walking, and in the third, an answer. 6. His poetry has rugged rhythm. Even his love and religious poems were written with equal vigor. His poem, Holy Sonnet 14, titled Batter My Heart, portrays the struggles in his mind between faith and unbelief, and his desire to show allegiance to his faith. The poem shows the unworthiness of man in the presence of God. In these poems, he looks at the consequences of sins. Particularly in this poem, Donne is saying that God is knocking to enter, but couldn't because the poet Parcenet is under the control of Satan. There is, in the poem, the image of military garrison and the image of the city. The poet Parcenet is the city. In the octave, the Parcenet is a captive, overrun by the enemy's army. In the sextet, the poet Parcenet is married to Satan, the enemy of God. So there is the image of marriage. However, the poet Parcenet is in love with God now, and he seeks divorce from Satan, who originally had his heart. He calls on God to rescue him from Satan. He could only be chased if God ravished him. Note: Ausby's conclusion on John Donne's poetry. His secular poems were original, energetic, and highly rhetorical, full of passionate thought and intellectual juggling. His love poetry often turns on paradox and puns, and was designed to work forcefully against the Petrarchan school of Sidney and Spenser. Study section summary. We commence this section by highlighting the general characteristics of metaphysical poetry. These characteristics include wit and conceit and general appeal to the intellect. We noted that Donne was a foremost metaphysical poet whose poetry was concerned with both secular and religious issues. His poems were consequently analyzed. End of study section 10. Thanks for listening.